Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the RAH Band podcast update. You may have remembered on the first episode, we interviewed Dan Hewson before the gig at the Jazz Cafe. We've now had the gig at the Jazz Cafe, and all I can really say is what a triumph it was. Everyone involved was on form. There was a really good crowd there. And the band just excelled themselves. And we'll probably be talking a little bit more about that later on. But two special guests today. We have Dean Verdin and Will McCormack, who could only be described as RAH Band superfans. So let's start with Dean. If you can just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your involvement in the RAH Band and how you got into being a superfan.
Yeah, it began a very long time ago as a teenager, and I think the same for Will. We were all captivated by Clouds Across the Moon when it first came out. But I think from that, what I discovered then was that there was this incredible back catalogue to delve into, which was amazing. And in the 90s, I set up the RAH Band's first website, back in the days when websites were barely a thing, And actually, Richard Hewson got in touch with me via the website and went, "Who are you? What are you doing? Why are you running my website?" And we've been friends ever since, So I've more or less spent the best part of my life with the RAH Band. So they're in my bloodstream.
And what about you, Will?
So as a child growing up in London, I think I was about 5 when Clouds came out. I can recall being at home with my family, and my sister used to record Top of the Pops on the Betamax video in those days. That's how long ago we're talking. And she said, "Listen to this, Will. We're a massive musical family." And she said, "Listen to this." And I just was blown away. And it never left me to this day. I'm now 43 and it still doesn't leave me now. I can see myself sitting there now watching it and feeling the same emotion like then. It's just incredible. And then from there, probably about 15, 20 years later on, I was doing some bar work in London, and Spotify had just kind of come out. So for some reason, I thought, the RAH Band, the RAH Band. And I thought, there's so much more to the RAH Band than I ever knew. I did have some of the stuff, but not all of it. But like Dean said, this massive back catalogue, I just got more and more interested in just the melodic music and just the relaxed kind of feeling it brings to me, overall, and kind of feel good stuff. And then from then, it became like second nature. Everything was about the RAH Band. And probably about 3-4 years ago, I really went to town on the vinyl. I bought everything from everywhere, from everybody, from everyone. And then, of course, met all you guys via social media. And that became even better because then I could then ask questions but no one else knew the answers to. Hence, I'd ask you something out and you said, "Well, speak to Dean," because Dean's the guru. Then I'd ask Dean. And from now, it's just exploded. I just absolutely love this stuff. And it brings back a lot of, really good times in my head as well about childhood. It's quite nostalgic as well. But yeah, all very positive. I'm just so pleased to be a part of all of this.
I think one of the things that always resonates with me is that, I've always been a musician myself, and I've always been involved with music. My family were involved in music, same as well. And, one of the things that I appreciate so much with the RAH Band is how intricate every piece of music is, and to think that is solely Richard, it's solely his vision, and Will and I were talking about this at the weekend. One of the things that I love about any particular artist is that they say, "This is what I'm doing," and they do it. They're not bowing down to any kind of record label pressure or any media pressure. They just say, "I'm doing this, and if you like it, that's great." And that, for me, is one of the most true elements of musicianship, that, people can be that direct and do. And thankfully, I think two things have happened recently that I noticed, which is I genuinely don't think Richard knows how much people love him and what he does. And I also think that now we're seeing a much greater appreciation of not just the RAH Band, but again, of music that has memories, that gives nostalgia. which is evident that Kate Bush is number one this week, you know?
Yeah, that's very true. I was talking to Dan, Richard's son, about this, and we've been talking about it for the last few years, because the gig was meant to happen nearly 3 years ago, and but in a way the lockdown has helped him, because he's had to transpose all of the parts, and he said it took him such a long time, because each part in each song was so intricate that it did take him a long time to write all these parts out and to get it right. And he said it was amazing. He did all the parts, and then all of a sudden, when you play it, it's like a jigsaw puzzle coming together. And you're right, Dean. I think the fact that the music is so theoretical and so intricate, and the fact that Richard did have the freedom in the 70s and the 80s to do what he wanted, because he didn't bow down to any record label executive, because he'd licensed all of his music to the record company. So he basically said, right, there it is, release it. If you like it, release it. He'd had no executive pressure to go one way or another. So, and that really does come out in the music. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's so on point. The gig, each track was so on point. The detail, the meticulous arrangements. It was like listening as clear as you can to the vinyl, to the CD, to whatever. You know, this stuff has been around for 40 odd years, and I've listened to it most of my life. To see that happen live to that detail is just sensational. It was mind blowing. It really was.
Yeah. So let's move on to the gig then, as Will's kind of started on this path. So just talk to me about, first of all, you heard the news that there was going to be a gig, and talk and just go through the timeline of the actual day itself. So, Dean.
Yeah. Well, my weekend was a bit avant-garde, to say the least. But you know, obviously, when we first heard about the gig, it was through social media, and Will and I were already in discussions about something else, which you know about, and you know, it was quite hard to believe. It was like, is this real? Is this genuinely happening? You know, and obviously we both follow Richard and Dan and whoever, and yourself on Facebook. You know, so this is how, and you're like, I think there was a complete and utter disbelief that it was actually going to happen. And something that I mentioned to Will, which is really interesting, which is that if you go back to a CD that was released in Japan in 1996, if you still got the original Japanese translation inside the book, it says an actual quote from Richard, which says, I'm putting together a live RAH band and hope to hit the venue soon. And you think, yeah, okay. And that was 96. And, you know, that's how many years ago now, 20 odd years ago, and you think, nah, it's never going to happen. And, you know, and it did. So obviously, you know, for me, obviously I came all the way from Spain. I literally got on a flight in the afternoon, arrived, met Will, went to the gig, went to bed, got back on a flight, came back, you know. So, and, you know, I was talking to Richard at the gig, and I said, I've never been back to the UK for 7 years, you know. I've never even been back to see my own family. And he said, that's, you know, one, that's very naughty, but also two, I'm honoured, you know. But I think as Will said, you know, I think Dan is an amazing musician, you know, that's a given. But, you know, to see, as you said, the level of work, and anybody who knows the RAH Band as intricately as myself or Will and yourself, it was notes perfect. You know, there was literally nothing out of place. And also it was nice that the brass section was allowed to have a bit of freestyle as well, because I think that made it more organic rather than it being, you know, note for note. But I think, you know, I think there are two things that stick in my mind, which is one is the introduction from Richard, which I just thought was wonderful, you know, to see him there, surrounded by his family and being part of it, you know, because we all know he's not a public, you know, he hasn't courted the publicity of music and fame. And the surprise at the end, which we'll not mention just yet.
How about you? But that's a great summary, Dean. It kind of brings through your passion, especially the fact that you came over from Spain, especially to see, and then go back straight afterwards.
My mum and dad were furious.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So how about you, Will? How did you react to the news initially, and what was the build up for you?
Yes, me and Dean chat a lot about obviously the RAH Band on Facebook and whatnot and the rest of it. And he said something along the lines of there might be a gig. And I was like, you what? Because, you know, to me, it's never going to happen. These things never happen. Not for the RAH Band anyway. Not in my lifetime. So anyway, so I decided to do a bit of, Googling. And of course, you know what I'm like. The minute I'm on it. So, and that's when I said to you, Aaron, is this the case? Can I share this? Can I share this on Facebook? Is that all right? And of course I was away, you know, me and a bit of RAH Band Facebooking. So, yeah, in a state of disbelief, I contacted Dean. I said, right. So me and my sister are going to go, you know, you come in? He said, yep, absolutely. Booked and done. So we travelled into London, me and my sister, and it was a baking hot day, wasn't it, as well? So we had a coffee down by the lock and whatnot, and which was lovely. Met Dean outside. But the whole day, I was just zoned out completely by the thought of going to see the RAH Band. And I've seen a lot of concerts in my life and, you know, very much into music, so my family. But something is very poignant about the RAH Band to me, and it goes back to childhood and that very happy time in my life, and it's synonymous with that, which is a very, you know, it's important to all of us, of course. And, you know, to me, it was never going to happen. You know, the RAH Bands were the clouds across the moon people to a lot of people. Unless you know them well, you don't know lots about them. As Dean said, you know, it was never mainstream. So walked in, and, you know, the Jazz Cafe is a fabulous venue. I've seen lots of bands there over the years, and I think they've had a bit of work to have done there. It looks a bit more it's a bit more open there now. Went in, sat down, had a nice meal. So never met Dean before, spoke to him 1,000 times on Facebook, and then having a conversation and whatnot. And just to build up, I remember sitting there and saying, well, I can't see anybody yet. Obviously, I've met Dan. I haven't seen Mr. Houston himself yet, whatever. And then with that, up he comes up the stairs, and we're all over talking to him, and obviously met yourself, Aaron. And then we're sitting there again, and, you know, the tension's kind of building. I was quite anxious, if I'm honest, because it's a big thing to me. Well, it's a big thing to all of us. And then all of a sudden, I saw Liz walk up the stairs. I was like, this is not happening. This really is not happening. And then obviously the band started, and yeah, Messages from the Stars. What a great way to open that whole gig, with Richard, with his talk beforehand. So honest, so humble. He's such a gent. Just talking, it's all very real. It comes from the heart, doesn't it? This stuff, yeah, with them, very much so. And there's a bit of banter in that as well, and the rest of it with the rah la la's and all that kind of thing. And then off they go, and you hear this Message from the Stars, which is just an epic track. And it's like, am I actually standing here with a friend of mine and my sister, looking down on Richard Houston and the RAH Band with Liz in the corner over there? Because this isn't happening. It really isn't happening. For me as well, just going back to my point before, everything was so on point. The absolute detail is immense. It was like sitting in your front room playing your vinyl. And also the diversity of the tracks as well. You know, obviously lots of, you know, kind of mainstream or more popular tracks. And then all of a sudden, Take Some Time comes into the mix. I mean, talk about random, but I love that song. It's a great track. And I said to Dean, I mean, this is interesting. Because actually, unless you're a diehard RAH Band fan, no one's going to know that track. No one's going to know it at all. Unless you really are into their music, you just wouldn't know it. And then, you know, Electric Fling and just all the different tracks. And then, of course, at the end, well, the end is the end, isn't it? It was just incredible. But I can recall saying to Dean, you what? It was just surreal. The whole thing was surreal to me. And just being able to dance away, and everyone was up there, and people that we've met through the Facebook group. And I'm going to say, hi, I'm Will. They're like, oh, hi, Will. It's like I've known them for years, like yourself, Aaron. You know, it's like this community is building about the RAH Band, like a RAH Band family. And it's just, yeah. But all credit to Richard and Liz and Dan. Absolutely. And yourself, Aaron.
Oh, thank you. Well, It's very kind of you to say, but it was. I think the thing for me was the fact that throughout the set, as you say, it was we didn't quite know what to expect, and they threw in Take Some Time, and to hear that played with a real band, with drums, bass, just chugging away, kind of brought life to that track. And it's the same for me with Vapor Trails when Fun Mileo came out. What a reception she got, and when that track started, it was again with the bass and the drums bringing it, power. It really it was a different experience. A lot of the tracks, as you say, are well known. They're well known, but it was the fact they threw in some obscure ones as well. I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. I didn't know exactly what was going to be played. I didn't keep. I just left Dan to it. Really, I didn't want to poke my nose in. I just left him to it, and just crossed my fingers it was going to come off. But he did. He pulled it off big time.
Yeah, I was going to say Richard and I had a discussion earlier this year where he suggested, what would be good tracks to play live, and aside from all the obvious ones. And, not wanting to disappoint anybody, because we had Slide, we had Perfume Garden, we had Sam the Samba Man, all of the songs that are stuck in people's heads, And as you say, I threw in a few curveballs in that conversation, and I suggested Take Some Time. The reason being is because knowing Dan's work, and because that is it's a sleeper of a track, it's on the B side of a 12-inch single. But because, when you know how Dan works, I thought actually Dan would do a really super job of that, we were right. But also tracks like Downside Up, which again is not a particularly well-known track unless you know the RAH Band, but the sound that came out of that band on that particular track, because the guitar work is so intricate as well as the brass section, I thought it sounded phenomenal, and Beyond as well. I think that is such an epic track, it just builds and builds and builds. And again, you could see the band. What I noticed on that particular track was that the band were so focused on the sheet music they had in front of them, they were, and it was just sublime. But the girls as well, they did an amazing job. They brought those songs to life. And Will and I had a little chuckle because we looked over to the right hand side, and there was Liz sat at her table, and she was singing all the words to herself, which I thought that was great.
Which, if anyone isn't familiar with Liz, she was the original singer. It was Richard's ex-wife, and she was the original singer on many of those tracks. And it was lovely to see her there and to be involved in what was such a great night. But I just want to add about the musicianship as well. Those guys didn't have a huge amount of time to rehearse. They've got busy schedules. They're doing gigs at Ronnie's. They're doing all sorts of things, lots of sessions and playing other bands. And for them to come together and actually put a show on, because I've seen many bands just turn up and play the music and go without any real connection and engagement with the audience. But the engagement from the very first note was so it was so obvious that they loved the songs and they wanted to put on a show, and because of that, the audience reacted in such a marvelous way.
They did, and I think as well, anybody who knows the RAH Band was so familiar with even the first half a dozen notes of any track, and I thought that was nice as well, as that nobody knew what to expect. There wasn't any. There was nothing discussed about it beforehand with anybody. The whole night was a surprise from beginning to end. And, as you say, as a group of musicians, they worked fantastically well together. And I'm quite surprised to not hear that they'd spent 12 months rehearsing that stuff, because that's how it came across.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. There was also a great feel amongst the audience with the band. It was a very calm environment. That's probably also due to the venue. But the kind of music that the RAH Band plays, it's very inviting, it's melodic, it's chilled. There's a lot of kind of meaning to it. And, you have to be a diehard RAH Band to really appreciate, that night. And it's just sensational. In fact, all this week, I can't concentrate at work. My brain is somewhere else the whole time. And I'm coming in from work, I'm thinking, I better check in with Dean, see if there's any news or anything else. Like there wouldn't be. But it's almost like it really is reborn to me. It's never really been anything but in the last few years, I'll be honest. But it really is this is a new chapter, isn't it? And just to see that happen. And I've added quite a lot of people from the band on Facebook, just because of obviously tagging and you see who's who, whatever. And the appreciation for the talent is just indescribable. It really is. I would much rather sit and listen to the RAH Band in a venue like that than anything else. It's just sublime from start to finish. It really was.
Well, I'm glad you both enjoyed it. So let's just go through. Start with Will. What was your kind of, what I'd say, a champagne moment of the night? What really kind of stick when you look back and you think about the night? What was the moment you thought, wow?
Gosh, there's so many, Aaron, to be honest with you. I think seeing people that I have so much, admiration for is a big thing. Notably, of course, Mr. Hewson, Liz, and Dan. Just seeing them as though they're actually real people, is quite a thing. I think when it after Richard, had his kind of initial kind of opening, hearing messages kick in with the drumming in the back and watching the guy reading the music like it was, this is a pivotal moment in his life, was just mind blowing. The whole gig, being there with my family and friends, of course, and meeting everyone else. And then, of course, without shadow of a doubt, the end, when I said to Dean, or Dean said to me, Liz has gone downstairs. And I was like, what? And I looked in the corner, and then I thought, no way, no, surely not. And then, of course, on she comes and does her part with Clouds Across the Moon. Just no words. So that probably is the main kind of champagne moment, as it were. But the whole thing and since is just an incredible. I'm so honoured to be a part of all of this. I really am.
Well, it's good to have you, Will, because you're both of you are both a major part of with the upsurge in social media and all the other things that are happening. It's vitally important that people like you who kind of drive this thing forward. And Richard he's more surprised and shocked that people actually still know of him. That was the impression I got from him when I spoke to him the other day. He just was totally unaware that there was so much love in the room and still so much recognition. So Dean, what about your moment of?
Yeah, it's again, same as Will. It's hard to pinpoint a moment that's because the whole thing was outstanding, from beginning to end, as Will says, from the first notes of Messages from the Stars, which of course we know has gone viral over the last few months, but I think, none of us expected Liz to be part of the event, we knew she'd be there, because she couldn't not support her son and be part of the environment and the nostalgia, but to actually, for her to get up on stage at the end and just be part of it and enjoy it, I think was a beautiful moment, and for me, it was a dream fulfilled, one, actually being part of it and, seeing the enjoyment of everybody there. I've been campaigning the RAH Band cause for many, many years, as you well know. And, to see people enjoy it, appreciate it, to see Richard enjoy and appreciate the event and see how much love and admiration was in that room for him and what he created. For me, that it warms my heart, because I'm so passionate about RAH Band that, think everybody should enjoy RAH Band. And, what better way to do it than than in a live environment, you know.
I agree there, Dean. And also, it was so great to see a diverse crowd, as in age. There was some. I was talking to a couple of guys afterwards, and they must have been in their early 20s. They knew of the RAH Band through messages. Through the TikTok revolution and everything. They had no idea that they had such an extensive catalogue, and they were mesmerised, absolutely mesmerised. And the good news is we managed to capture everything. I know you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
When I say cap, we had an audio feed out from the desk, and just look out in the coming months. Hopefully, we had a release through YouTube. Some really good footage, and who knows what could happen to the audio.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Super.
So that's the gig. So, but before we move on to other things, I just want to talk to you about what it's like being a super fan. Because I thought I was a fan, and I thought I was a little bit obsessed with the RAH Band. So, can I just ask, is it the first thing you think about when you wake up in the morning?
I don't think it's that bad. But as you know, there are other things going on in RAH Band land. And so for me, for the last 4.5, 5 months, yes, it has been, because there's been so much to do. The amount of hours and hours and hours that I've listened to RAH Band in the last few months, I mean, I couldn't even add it all together and give you a time. You know, it's a lot. And, just pottering about the house and doing different things, and you stick RAH Band on. And, my partner says, have you not heard enough of them?
But for people who don't know, I mean, we've already informed, I think, on the last podcast that there is a box set, a series of 2 box sets coming out, and Dean and Will have been involved with that. I don't want to give too much away, but they've been heavily involved with the cataloguing, labellings. It's been quite an intense process, but that's for another podcast. I don't want to give too much away. But what about you, Will? Do you wake up in the morning thinking about the RAH Band?
Well, there are times I have done, especially this week after the gig, because I can't get it out of my head. Again, it's just a massive appreciation about talent. I love music, and I've got several different artists that I absolutely love. But again, without repeating myself, it's also quite nostalgic for me. It's about childhood. I used to live in London, and I remember my dad bringing home a single to my sister, who's older than me, and it was Slide. And I heard Slide from a very young age, and it was like, I mean, I was quite young at the time. But then when Clouds kicked in, it just became, yeah. So I think for me, it's about feeling good about life. It's what makes me feel good. The RAH Band, it's a lot of positive energy. It's just happy stuff. Yeah. So long may it continue.
That's good. I just want to add there, the first single I ever bought was The Crunch in 1977, and right. I played it to death. Honestly, you could it almost wore out, and it's really ever since then. And then I kind of rediscovered because they obviously, 1977, it was more glam rock with that track, wasn't it? It was more of a glam rock track, pop track. And then I didn't really discover them again until the early 80s. I started getting into Level 42 and Freeze and things like that. And I kind of rediscovered them. I thought, hold on a minute, this is the same band. And I kind of went from there, really.
Yeah, I have a very similar story, and I told Will this at the weekend, because my introduction, and I guess it's an age thing for all of us, was Clouds Across the Moon. However, I found in my dad's record collection The Crunch and Slide. My dad said, no, that's a different RAH Band. And when you're 11 or 12, you just accept what your dad tells you as fact. So I never queried it. And then, of course, maybe a year or so later, when I started going into the back catalogue, and this was before we had the internet where everything was so easily accessible, we used to have to go to the reference library and look in the Music Master, I was like, it is the same RAH Band, and sort of putting that jigsaw together of what I consider to be very, very different eras of RAH Band. Melodic and brass heavy glam rock of the late 70s. You move into that chill jazz funk of the early 80s, and then we go into this, these beautifully melodic pop songs and dance songs of the 80s, and then obviously onwards into the 90s. And as we know, he's still making music now, and he's still doing exactly what he wants, whether anybody is interested or not. I think what's interesting is that if you put together a RAH Band compilation CD and you put songs from each era, it's almost like there's three different bands on the go here, or three or four or five. But one thing is constant, which is the quality and the musicianship and the tone. I think that's one of the things that I've always noticed with RAH Band, is that whether it's one era or another, you have a linear tone to the music that, for me, is always recognizable as RAH Band.
Well, that sums it up very well, Dean. And I just want to kind of go on to a very interesting thing that's going to happen in late July, I believe, or middle of July. We're not 100% sure yet, but ITV have a drama called McDonald and Dodds, and they've just started their third series. Now, we were approached by them way back in November, wanting to know if they could re-record Clouds Across the Moon. Not in its entirety, but they wanted to use the track as a basis for the episode. And it's McDonald and Dodds it's an ITV drama which has been going. Say this is the third series. It's also sold globally, so there's a nice little audience there. It went so well, apparently, they want to call the episode "Clouds Across the Moon," and it is the fourth film. They're calling it films. Fourth episode of which will be aired. We're not 100% sure, as I say, but it is in July. So please keep a lookout for that. So what I really want to try and do is create the Kate Bush effect here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What a great idea.
Yeah, fantastic.
So just keep an eye out for it, but we're going to do a little bit of promo for that before. Yeah. It's quite an honour because they obviously had to get permission from Richard, first of all, to use the song and to re-record, and then they said, well, we want to call it Clouds Across the Moon. So what an amazing thing. I don't think that's ever happened like that before.
Amazing news. Amazing.
Yeah. Incredible. And again, it just goes to show, although, the Jazz Cafe is a relatively small venue, and it was packed, jam-packed, we're not the only people that know about RAH Band, appreciate RAH Band, and want to relive RAH Band, I think that's amazing news.
Yeah. So this is really kind of getting a bit of head of steam behind it, which is it's been needing that. I think maybe with lockdown, people are rediscovering old music again. That we've noticed that people have become more aware of back catalogues, and with the all the Tears for Fears, for example, coming out and gigging again, being really successful with that. I don't think this era of music will ever go away because it was recorded so well. It has a lot of heart and soul in it, so hopefully there will be a future for the RAH Band. We don't know which way it's going to go. We're hoping that from the Jazz Cafe gig, it's spurred, it's pricked a few ears up. I mean, I know for sure Solar Radio have been bigging up the RAH Band all week, and I've had a few chats with a couple of the DJs there, and they say they couldn't believe it. They were there and they couldn't believe it, and they've been spreading the word. So yeah, let's hope in the future. So I just want to end this podcast really just by thanking both Dean and Will for their huge input over the last how many years, I don't know, but it's so lovely to meet you both at the gig. And
Likewise.
For me, it was like a showcase. It brought everything together, both the fans, the music, and let's hope there'd be a nice future for the catalogue and for Richard and for everyone else involved. So parting words, please, both Will and Dean.
So a massive thank you to all of you involved. Again, I can't reiterate how much love I have for this band and the cause, and especially last Saturday night. I'm just gutted it's not tonight because that's how much I loved it. And again, without repeating myself, it's an absolute honour to be part of all of this, and long may it continue. And thanks to everyone.
Yeah, exactly what Will says. I'm honoured to have had RAH Band in my life for all these years. Honoured to be part of the gig. Honoured to be part of the box set. For me, I just can't shout loud enough. Please listen to the RAH Band. Enjoy them. They're a wonderful band, and whatever genre of music you like, they've done a version of it.
on that note, I'm going to spring something on you now. Who wants to choose the outro music? Which track should be used here?
Oh, that's a difficult question, right? That really is. Dean, I don't know. I'm going to have to go with Downside Up.
It's
in my head.
Yeah, Downside Up it is. Okay, well, thanks a lot for listening. I'm sure there'll be another episode of the RAH Band podcast update soon, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye for now.
Cheers, chaps.